Queen are a rock band from the UK, and actually they're one of the biggest in the world, one of the most popular that there's ever been. They were formed in 1970 with Brian May on guitar, Freddie Mercury on vocals, and Roger Taylor on drums, and they were soon joined by John Deacon on bass. They became huge in the mid-70s. And their 1981 Greatest Hits album, which was the first of their Greatest Hits album, still is the biggest selling album in the UK ever. They lost their way for a little while in the early 80s, and probably their worst album, Hot Space, was released at that point in time. But in 1985, they staged a massive comeback by absolutely smashing it at Live Aid. Unfortunately, Freddie Mercury died of AIDS in 1991. They released a couple more albums after that. One more album after that he'd already recorded the vocals for. John Deacon retired in 1997, but the band are still going with Brian and Roger and guests. There's a lot been written about them, but if you want to know more about them as a band, I strongly recommend the 2018 film Bohemian Rhapsody, which is a superb biopic of Freddie Mercury. Hi, my name's Dan, and this was the second album by Queen. Now, I need to frame this because most of the videos on this channel are reviews of albums which are in a list, and the list is the 3,000 greatest albums of all time, according to a website called Acclaimed Music, and it's an amalgamated list from lots of different sources. I've got quite a lot of confidence in this list, and I'm trying to review my way through from 3,000 up to number one. And but I occasionally step out and do something. Either I do some request reviews or I do something that I particularly want to do myself. And this is one of these. So this comes under the category of criminally missing. And what this means is this is an album that's not in this list of the 3,000 greatest albums of all time, and I think it should be. So I want to stick it here on my channel. So this is what I'm doing. So in my opinion, this is possibly Queen's best album ever. I would say it's their most coherent. It's the one that works best as a kind of packaged whole as an album. So for a lot of the albums I'm reviewing in the list, I'm coming to them quite fresh. I've got quite a bit of distance from them. I have no chance of listening to this as if I'm listening to it fresh, because I've loved this album since my teens. So I'm actually a huge Queen fan, one of my favourite bands ever. I was introduced to them at the age of 11 when Bohemian Rhapsody was number one in the UK, and I discovered this album in my mid and maybe slightly later teens. So my abiding memory of this album, whenever I listen to it, I remember where I was at one point when I was listening to the album. I had a portable cassette player, which is one of those little slab ones with the press down buttons at the front, and an earphone, not headphones, a single earphone. And I had put it in my bag, and I was doing my paper round. This was in my late teens, and listening to this album whilst I was walking along delivering the papers. And I can see, every time I listen to the album, I can see the places that I was in when I was doing this. Originally, I had this on vinyl, so the cassette copy that I had was one that I'd run off so that I could listen to it on the move. But I had the vinyl, and the two sides were not side A and side B. There was side black and side white. And for a long time, I didn't actually know which of these sides was meant to be played first. And I think this was deliberate, the way they presented it. And there was certainly this idea of contrasts. And Queen at the time, so with this album and a few later albums, definitely did this thing about black and white and doing the contrasts. Musically, I'd describe this as somewhere between prog rock and art rock. It's It's not really fun on prog, but it's definitely kind of arty, and it's got quite a lot going on here. There's a lot of shades of light and dark. There's heavy rock in here, but there's classical feel as well. There's gentleness and there's kind of grittiness. It's musically, I mean, you know, there's got to be no secret that I love this album. Musically, I think it's hugely effective. At times, you've got a wall of guitars done by Brian May in just such an amazing way. And the whole thing is really flamboyant. It makes other rock seem quite bland, I think. And I grew up with this kind of stuff, which is why I come to some other rock and I think, it's all right, but, you know, it's just not got the complexity and the nuance that this has. It's rich and it's forever changing. And like I said, it works really well as an album. It works better as listening to the whole thing as an album than the individual songs do. It's not really a concept album, but the tracks mostly roll into each other one after another as if they were kind of moving on from one thought to another. There's a lot of fantasy concepts being used in here. There's a particular thing about the White Queen and the Black Queen. They've got a song on one side about the White Queen and a song on the other side called March of the Black Queen. There's one song which confused me for years until I found out where the source of where it's from. It's the track Fairy Fella's Master Stroke, and it's actually based on a painting that's quite an unusual painting in itself. And so there's a lot of this fantasy stuff, and then there's a few more kind of down-to-earth songs about life and love. There's Funny How Love Is, which is quite whimsical. There's Loser in the End, which is actually about relationship with a mother rather than kind of up and down relationship rather than sideways relationship. Side Black has got more fantasy on it, and probably my favourite track on the album, and it's really hard to peg a favourite, is March of the Black Queen. It's just so varied and moves on. It feels like it's the prototype that led to Bohemian Rhapsody, which came, I think, on the next album after this. I would definitely say that the two clips of the album that I will be putting at the start and the end of this video are nowhere near enough for you to get the full feel of the album, and I strongly recommend you listen to the whole thing. It's so evocative. The singing is so versatile. Freddie Mercury is definitely regarded as one of the best singers in rock, and quite rightly so. And I think that this album, possibly more than any of the albums, show not just the strength of his voice and the stridentness, but actually the gentleness that he can bring to to his singing as well. So over the years, this is possibly one of the albums that I have played most for my own pleasure. It's probably one of my top 10 played albums. I absolutely adore it. So there we go. I'd love to know what you think of this album. You might completely disagree with me, and I'm very happy for that to happen. Please talk to me through the comments box. That's it from me for now.